Hello everyone, and thank you for joining the presentation today. My name is Philip Arias, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Joule, which is one of the Cell Press journals. Today I'm very glad to have the opportunity to be speaking on how to publish in high-impact journals. I have a lot of experience as an editor-in-chief of leading international journals. And I'm going to be giving some advice on how to write manuscripts to maximize the chances of success for publication in high-impact journals, and also give an oversight of the editorial process at journals to try and perhaps dispel some of the myths about publishing in leading journals there. There will very much be the opportunity to ask questions. Please ask written questions at any time in the presentation. Then we'll have an audio Q&A session at the end. I really hope to receive some good questions. I think we'll get the most benefit where we have some full and frank dialogue about publication process, your experiences of that, and I hope I can provide some answers and reassurance and guidance that will be very helpful going forwards. First of all, to give an overview of my presentation, I'm briefly going to introduce myself and some of my experiences working around the world, including in India. I'm aware that lots of the audience are based in India and different countries around the world. I've given some of my experiences there. I very much introduce the Cell Press portfolio, including some of our exciting launches in physical science. And then move on to talking about manuscript preparation, the editorial process, and some of the features that Cell Press do to engage with the research community around the world, some of our innovation projects and our activities in community building. So to start off, I mentioned my experience in India. I will preface this by saying I have been working in high-impact scientific publications for around 15 years. Previously, I worked for RSC, Royal Society of Chemistry, where I ran a portfolio of 7 high-impact journals. More recently, for the last 3.5 years, I've been an editor-in-chief at Cell Press, publisher of the famous journal Cell in the life sciences and many more leading journals too. I have a lot of experience in high-impact publishing there, and I think this presentation is going to be a super opportunity to give some of the editors insights about the overall process there. One of the joys about being an editor is we are very much immersed in the research communities that we serve. And great research takes place all around the world, in many countries around the world. And I feel very privileged to be interacting with scientists and researchers in lots of different countries in the world. And indeed, from 2013 to 2016, I was based in India. Currently, I live and work in the UK, in England. But from 2013 to 2016, I lived in Mumbai in India. There I worked for RSC as executive editor, and I had many interactions with researchers and institutes and the broad scientific community right across India. The map here shows all the different institutes that I visited in my 3 years there. And I was forming networks and building collaborations with researchers to gain a greater understanding of current research and exciting developments in research in India. And then subsequent to that, I also used my my scientific knowledge and networks in an Indian context. I interacted with lots and lots of scientists right across India. You can see the photo of me with famous Indian scientist, Professor C.N.R. Rao there. Subsequent to my time as editor with RSC, I spent 2 further years in India, as I said, working on projects, connecting with local scientists to try to develop solar energy systems for unelectrified villages and slums. That involved a lot of collaboration with Indian researchers, and it was a very stimulating time, and it showed me the value of science and of technology development from a different perspective. As editor, I was dealing primarily with very new original research ideas. Setting up this project, Project Light, for solar energy in India, I was dealing with the application of science and technology very much at the front line, dealing with many unelectrified communities in urban and rural India, especially in the state of Maharashtra. And that was extremely stimulating. I also established a range of environmental projects in India in different spheres, including in plastic recycling and in highlighting air pollution. You can see here me featured in the HT, one of the leading newspapers in India, after I installed meters to monitor air quality and look at the AQI, the air quality index in urban India. That really helped to highlight some of the challenging pollution conditions that exist in urban India. As editors, we are primarily involved in science, but we have a range of interests outside of science as well. One of the things that fascinated me in my time in India was the amazing heritage, and especially the water heritage architecture. Stepwells are quite a uniquely Indian construction, often dating back hundreds, in some cases many thousands of years as well. I first became aware of stepwells in India and became, as I said, fascinated by these structures. A few stepwells are quite well known and relatively well cared for. On my slide here, I show pictures of Rani Ki Vav in Patan in Gujarat and Adalaj Wow, just outside Ahmedabad in Gujarat as well. Rani Ki Vav is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site and features on the back of a 100 rupee note as well. But there are many, many smaller but still very notable stepwells in India, which are much less well known and which are often in danger. They are trashed or not respected in the communities, or danger of encroachment or being filled in and lost to posterity. So I set up a collaborative mapping project called Stepwell Atlas, which has mapped lots of stepwells, and I encourage anyone here to take a look at that if you're interested. I also made the most of wider opportunities that India offers, including following the cricket very closely, and especially Mumbai Indians, and going to lots of games there, doing marathon running in India in lots of cities, being involved in rural life, especially visiting many villages in Maharashtra too. And finally, just to demonstrate how I took to heart some of my time in India, when I was there, Prime Minister Modi introduced the Make in India initiative, and I really tried to take this in heart. And indeed, a few months after, my first daughter was born, Sarah. You can see her there. She's now 4 years old, back with me in the UK. I'm here primarily to talk to you about scientific publishing. Before I come to the main part of the talk, which is to give editors advice on writing papers and maximizing publication in high-impact journals, I want to briefly introduce the Cell Press portfolio of journals. The Cell Press is a leading international publisher. We are part of the broader Elsevier family. The flagship journal for Cell Press is the journal Cell in the Life Sciences. And again, I will introduce the journals as a reminder. If anybody has any questions at any time, please write these in the question box and we'll come to a Q&A session at the end. So please do feel free to write questions as we're going on. And Cell Press has a number of primary research journals. Until recently, all our primary research journals were in the life sciences. You can see they're very respected journals in the field, journals like Neuron and Cell Stem Cell and Immunity, all supporting the flagship journal Cell, which has an impact factor above 30. It's a very prestigious international journal. But more recently, a few years ago, we branched out into the physical sciences as well. So of our 21 primary research journals, we now have around 4 or 5 in the physical sciences. We've had a range of recent launches, including Chem, Joule, Matter, One Earth, Cell Reports, Physical Science. My background is originally in physics, and so I will now briefly introduce the physical science journals at Cell Press to you. Before I get there, I should say that we at Cell Press, we also have a range of trends journals, which are review journals. And these cover different topics, many in the life sciences, but also starting out in the physical sciences as well. And we have some partner journals, such as Biophysical Journal, which we publish on behalf of partner societies. Gives us a chance to be close to the research community in a different way. And we do feel it's very important that authors have choice in terms of the publication model in which they are publishing. Most of our journals are subscription journals, where subscribers get access to all the content that we have published. But the publication landscape is changing. Some authors like to have the option of publishing in open access journals. So we have a range of open access titles, very respected journals, including iScience, Cell Reports, and more recently, a new launch, Cell Reports Physical Science, offering an open access, a prestigious open access route covering the physical sciences. And we also have some hybrid titles, which are primarily subscription, but with an open access component as well. And our new journal, One Earth, is an example of that. Well, some questions are coming up here about, is there an engineering branch in Cell journals? That's a great question. I will cover that soon. We're having a range of exciting launches, and some which have some overlap with the engineering space too. But I mentioned research output in India. India is an extremely important country for our journals and for science generally. The scholarly output of India is rising all the time. We're very glad to see some world-class research emanating from India, and even more glad to be publishing some of this in Cell Press journals. The slide here shows a range of institutes who publish in Cell Press journals. You can see there TIFR, areas of the CSIR labs, ISC in Bangalore, various of the IITs in IIT Bombay, IIT Kanpur, and some universities like the University of Hyderabad, and research intensive institutes like JNCSR there as well. So we are very glad for the support from Indian researchers and from researchers right around the world. I mentioned our physical science expansion. This is very close to my heart. I am the editor-in-chief of Joule. I founded Joule. Our first issue was in September 2017. And Joule is a home for outstanding energy research. The need for more sustainable energy is one of the key challenges that researchers around the world are grappling with at the moment. And I established Joule to be a domain-bridging and scale-spanning journal to cover energy research. By scale-spanning, I mean that we publish research both at the very fundamental level and lab-based level research, going up through to from molecular and materials research, going up through to devices and systems, right the way through up to analysis at the global level. There's been a question here about, do we have a journal on the circular economy? Aspects of the circular economy very much come into Joule, and also our new journal, One Earth, which I will introduce shortly as well. But Joule very much looks to highlight the implications and challenges, opportunities of energy research at different scales. We're a research journal, but the research we're publishing has been given huge visibility and been amplified in terms of impact by being featured in Joule. Lots of Joule research has been featured in global media, both aimed at the general public, media outlets like BBC and New York Times, Newsweek, as well as the more scientific press. Lots of Joule stories are the most pressing energy research that have taken place in recent years. And we're delighted that that has been recognized through, very recently, we were awarded a PROS award. That's the leading industry award for scientific publication. We were awarded the best new journal in the physics and mathematics sphere. So we're really glad to receive that award there. And indeed, I've given an example of just one recent paper from India in Joule, a thermoelectrics paper by Kanishka Biswas, who's an outstanding young researcher at JNCSR, just outside Bangalore. So do have a look at Joule and the great articles that we are publishing. Our website is given here, but it's cell.com/Joule. Jewel very much builds on the success of Chem, which was the first physical science journal published by Cell Press. That launched a year before us. That's sort of impressive first impact factor of around 20 already. My journal, Jewel, will get its first impact factor this year. We're expecting that to be around 30. So watch this space when that's released in June or so this year. But Chem is our home across the chemical sciences, covering research and how chemistry and chemical science research is affecting humanity. Chem really tries to show the wider societal implications of all the research that they publish, linking the fundamental research to the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, to show the opportunities and how this fundamental research and applied research might have impacts on wider society and wider humanity in areas such as in hunger, in global health, in clean water and sanitation, in pharmaceuticals, and so on. The editor-in-chief is the award-winning editor, Dr. Robert Eagling, and do have a look at Chem if you're interested or researching in the chemical sciences. Both Jewel and Chem are publishing work from the very top researchers around the world. We were both excited that last year, in 2019, the Nobel Prize for Chemistry was awarded to 3 pioneering battery researchers for their work in developing lithium-ion batteries. And both Jewel and Chem have published a range of articles by these Nobel Prize-winning researchers, which I'm showing on the slide here. We've had special connections in to highlight the work we published and the more long-standing impact of the prize-winning work by John Goodenough and Stan Whittingham and co-winners. So yeah, please do take a look at this too. One of the most active research fronts in the physical sciences today is in materials science. And around a year ago, July 2019, we launched the journal Matter to build bridges within and across disciplines in materials science. Matter's got off to a fantastic start under the leadership of my colleague, Editor-in-Chief Steve Cranford. They're publishing both fundamental synthesis, structure and properties, as well as performance on emerging material systems and novel characterization methods. So please do have a look at Matter, some of the wonderful work being published there. And One Earth, coming back to the question on circular economy, One Earth is one of our most recent launches in the physical sciences. Again, in September last year was when this journal was launched. And One Earth covers sustainability, including transformative solutions and environmental change, the drivers and mechanisms and long-term context behind environmental change, and looking at Earth systems as well in terms of planetary boundaries, thresholds, and tipping points. One Earth is a hybrid journal, so it's both a subscription journal with an open access component to it as well. And the editor-in-chief, Lewis Collins, will be delighted to hear from you if you have work you feel might be suited for One Earth. I mentioned our trends journals. The most recent trends journal is Trends in Chemistry, which is one of the first trends journals, reviews journals we published in the physical domain. Editor-in-Chief Tom Dersh is looking to tease out new perspectives on some of the big questions in chemistry, publishing reviews across the chemical sciences, including physical, organic, inorganic, catalysis, biological, analytical chemistry, and so on. So do take a look at Trends in Chemistry. And just finishing the introduction to the Cell Press journals, I mentioned some of our recent open access multidisciplinary journals. Cell Reports Physical Science publishes cutting-edge research across the physical sciences. And iScience is another open access option we have, which publishes basic and applied research at an advance across a specific field. So these are two journals which are making a very strong name for themselves, and they are home for impressive physical science research that you want to publish in the open access way. We have some upcoming launches too. I will just mention these journals. Med, covering the medicine domain. Patterns has got its first issue coming extremely soon, covering data science. Cell Reports Medicine, another addition to the Cell Reports family, and STAR Protocols, setting forth protocols, especially across the life sciences there. So these will all be coming out soon. We're excited about these launches. Please do take a look at the websites if these are pertinent to the research that you are doing. Okay, as I said, I am an editor and I have handled many thousands, tens of thousands, I think, of manuscripts in the 15 or so years I have been running high impact journals. So I'm very familiar with evaluating research, and I hope that I have some notable insights to convey to you about how to best package your research to maximize its impact, to maximize its visibility, and to maximize successful publication in high impact journals. And before I get into the, the nuts and bolts of advice in writing papers, I think a really fundamental question to consider while doing research, before even writing a word of the write-up of research projects into a manuscript, is think about what you are doing and why you want to publish your work. Because ultimately, research can speak for itself. If you have impressive results, that's going to make the chances of publishing in high impact and prestigious high profile journals much more likely. There are no tricks or dark arts in terms of getting very sort of low-level research published in impressive and prestigious journals, but there are ways of packaging good research results to maximize the chances of success in high-impact journals. So at every stage of research, at the bench, in the lab, wherever you're doing your research, do think about what you are doing and what the key story you are looking to tell is. Are you doing something new? Very much I hope that you are. Is there anything challenging or notable in your work? Again, I hope so. Is the work going to be of interest to other researchers? Will it influence how other researchers think about what they're doing? Will it help shape research activity in your lab and in other labs around the world going forward? Are you providing solutions to some difficult problems? These are things that we really hope the answer is yes. This is why we do research, to address some of the fundamental challenges in society and also to gain new scientific insight at a basic or applied level about interesting systems. If you are doing exciting new work, then that really can help frame what you're trying to convey in the manuscript that you are writing. So the write-up of a manuscript, the point I'm trying to make, the write-up is a continuation of a research project. It's not completely orthogonal to the result gathering stage. And in connection with that, picking the right journal is very important indeed. It's important to be realistic, but picking the right journal can also save you as an author a lot of time and frustration. Don't just immediately decide to submit your work to the highest impact journal in the field or the highest impact journal in existence. That can cause a series of delays. It can cause editors and reviewers to be frustrated. It can cause frustrating messages to come back to you as the author. It's important to think about who the audience interested in your research is, and then to select an appropriate journal based off of that. So clearly the journal that you are selecting to submit to needs to be within the scope. Your research needs to be within the scope of that journal. And so do look at the aims and scope of the journals you're thinking of submitting to get a good feel that there's a good fit there. Look at the papers that have been published by that journal recently. Look at the papers that you're citing in your research. If there's all these factors are starting to correlate on specific journal or several possible candidate journals, that's a good leading indicator that journal or those journals could be an appropriate choice to submit your research to. And very much the right journal should have editors who know the field, who are immersed in the research communities a journal are serving, who are aware of the important questions being asked, who know the appropriate reviewers to invite for your submission, and who can very much guide the process and resolve disputes. So having journals with great editors can very much add a lot of value to the process there and help avoid mutual confusion and mutual frustration. At Cell Press, we have full-time in-house professional editors. We all have scientific backgrounds, but we're now working as our full-time career as editors. And that gives us the time and the expertise to be very much working with authors and reviewers to ensure that we have an efficient process. This is what we are doing full-time, to ensure that our experience handling many hundreds and thousands of manuscripts shapes the way we think about evaluating, and it makes us have a rigorous yet efficient and fair process that is fair to researchers in all countries. We know it's important when you've got exciting results that you have timely decisions and that we are responsive and hospitable, that we are offering excellent service, excellent communication at all stages in the evaluation process. And I'll come to our evaluation processes quite soon. I do want to emphasize that we listen to the communities that we serve, and we have the time and the resources and very much the desire to innovate and to act on community feedback and to ensure that we are offering value at all stages of the publication and evaluation process. We just had a question, should I submit my manuscript to multiple journals or only to one high-impact journal? It's very important you only submit a manuscript to one journal at a time. It's considered an ethical breach to submit the same research to two or more publications at once. If you do that, our Cell Press journals and many other publishers have detection software where we can become aware of ethical breaches like this, and there can be serious sanctions if you're submitting the same research in parallel to different journals. So please only submit the research to one journal at any one time. So what makes a good manuscript? Well, a great manuscript is clear, it is useful, and it's exciting. And it can convey both to specialists in the immediate field, but also perhaps to people who might have an interest in your research, but have a background in slightly different subdisciplines or even completely different disciplines or fields, what you have done, how this builds on what people have done previously, and why this is important, how this might be taken forward. A clear, concise communication is very important. A logical flow to a manuscript is so important. That means that a reader can come to the same conclusions that you as an author can have. It's important to write in a style that transmits the message clearly. And one of my overall pieces of advice as an editor is to put yourself in the mind, in the shoes of an editor or of someone in a different discipline. When you have been working on a research project for months or possibly even years, you are very much an expert in that field, and you might feel that other people can immediately understand the importance of what you've done or the novelty of your results. But that very often isn't the case if a manuscript isn't packaged in a logical flow with clear communication. As an editor, I see thousands of manuscripts every year, and it's important when we're looking at new submissions, but that very quickly when I see a new manuscript, it's clear to me what the advance is that is being presented, why that's important, how that builds on what other people have done, what the impact of that research can be. So these are things to think very much from the outset of writing a manuscript. So what are some general points about paper writing? Well, I would say that the title and the abstract are really important. They should not be an afterthought. They should, as succinctly and clearly as possible, convey the importance and the novelty of the research that you're presenting. And I'll come more to titles soon. I'll say, what's the story? What is the key message that you're trying to get across? Try and convey that as simply as possible, as concisely as possible. Make use of lots of summary statements, and do try and get some feedback before submission. When you're submitting a manuscript, it shouldn't be a first draft where you're hoping that the editor or the referees will put in many hours of work to improve all the language and to try and get your work into a a submittable state. This is something that you should be doing before you're submitting. You should be proud of every manuscript that you submit. It should be what you feel is a great example of putting forward your results and conclusions and discussion that will leave a good impression on the minds of everyone who reads it. So please do put the time and effort in yourself and with your colleagues prior to submitting work. And I know it's very, very difficult when English is not your first language to write a scientific paper in English as a second language. So that makes it even more important to hopefully you have colleagues who are native speakers or very fluent in English if you're not yourself, to give guidance, to give feedback about the clarity of the work that you are presenting there. And I'll have a few more specific tips coming soon on that area. But a cover letter is also important. As I said, editors see thousands of manuscripts every year, and a cover letter is your opportunity to try and convince the editor in a relatively short space of time why the paper is a good fit for this particular journal. You can give some context behind the submission. What has motivated the research here? What has inspired the research here? That kind of helpful background that might not fit in the abstract of the manuscript itself, but can help to convey some of the, as I said, some of the motivation behind the work. If there's controversy in the field, if there's if there's a lot of competition that we should know about, if we feel that some people will be particularly helpful to review the work or might be prejudiced against it in some ways, including that extra context in the cover letter is helpful and is important. And I'll come to referee suggestions and exclusions soon. But the cover letter should be a vehicle to give this extra context. It's not meant to be just a copy and paste of the abstract or the list of past accomplishments or publications from your labs or the meetings you presented this work and the feedback that you've received there as well. The cover letter is an opportunity, and if you're just trying to copy and paste the abstract, that's what I would call a missed opportunity there. But you can give your own value judgments. If you feel that this is the most important work you've done in recent years, you can mention that, I would say, in the cover letter. If you feel this will have widespread impact and implications, you can mention that, but you should just justify that rather than saying in every cover letter this will be a very high impact publication. If it contradicts some recent research in the literature, that's also a good thing to mention in the cover letter too. So the cover letter, treat that as an opportunity. And then we come to some more specific advice on manuscript presentation. Do take the time to think about what you are presenting and why. The purpose of publishing a manuscript is to communicate your message to a broad community. If your paper, your manuscript is poorly written or presented in a way that makes its message unclear, there's a very real risk that reviewers, editors, readers may not understand what you're putting across. So to ensure your work is understandable, it is really important you use proper English language. And I would always advise short sentences and short words. It's easier to have unambiguous sentences to get the meaning clear when we use short sentences and short words. And if you have the opportunity of consulting with a native speaker, that's something that's good to do as well. Coming back to the advice on the title, this is the first thing an editor or a reviewer will see. And a title should contain the fewest possible words while getting across the scientific content of the paper. We like short titles. Try and make titles as short and concise as possible. Try and attract the reader's attention. Obviously, be specific and directly reflect the content of your manuscript. So be informative, but be concise. And try and convey what the key findings are. Don't have titles that say insight into or a study of, for example. They are words which don't add anything to the title and can be off-putting to an editor, to a reviewer, or to a reader. We don't like titles that make no sense or fail to represent subject matter adequately. So don't try and use joke titles. and ensure that the title is accurate. That will also help readers find your research when they're using search engines. That aspect of search engine optimization is very important. So a good title can lead to higher readership and higher citations of your paper subsequently as well. In terms of the abstract, again, it's so important this is clear and understandable. There should be a single paragraph summarizing the problem, the methods, the results, and the conclusions. The abstract acts as an advertisement for your article. This is what is nearly always freely available via online searching and indexing. So you want to make the abstract as catchy and as accurate as possible to have the greatest impact. A good abstract can strongly encourage a reader to read, or an editor, to read the rest of your paper. And again, one of my pieces of long-standing editor advice, many authors sort of write the abstract at the very end of preparing the paper, almost as an afterthought. I would encourage you to think about the abstract from the very beginning of writing a paper, so it accurately reflects the content of the work that you do. It's an opportunity to tell the reader what the paper's about, what the real critical information needed is. It's a hook to describe your data. Don't use it as a sort of exhaustive list of all of your data, all of the characterization experiments or whatever that you might have, but link to the outstanding questions, the key findings, the key results you're presenting, and the central conclusion that you're putting across to. And do think about making sure relevant keywords are covered in the abstract of the paper itself. In terms of the introduction to the paper, this is also an important opportunity to state where the field stands, what the problem you're addressing is, and to identify what you're putting across as the solutions and the limitations there. And please be clear about opportunities and challenges, about solutions and limitations. Nobody likes to see an unrealistically overhyped paper saying that your work is going to cure everyone of cancer or to provide unlimited cheap energy or energy storage for everyone in the world or whatever. It's important to give the appropriate context, the background and motivation behind the research, including original important work recently done in the literature in this area. Show how your work goes beyond that and how your work may be taken forward as well. So think about the past, what has happened recently, the present, what you're showing in the new paper, and the future, what the implications and how that might be taken forward with are. Okay. And that brings us to the effective results section. I wanted to spend a little more time on this because this is where you describe the important results of your research. It is so important that you present the results which are essential to the discussion. And so any data of primary importance should be shared and included here. Where there's data of secondary importance, that can be put in the SI, in the supplementary information section. Don't attempt to hide data and to try and sort of fragment and get a second paper out of the same sort of original research, splitting your results into many papers. We call that fragmentation. We take a dim view of that. It dilutes the impact of any one paper. It results in lower quality papers, and it means your work's more likely to be rejected, especially if it's a prestigious journal, such as the ones that I run. In the results section, do use subheadings to keep results of the same type together. That makes it easier to review and read and helps to convey the logical order and the clear story that you're trying to put across there. And do highlight findings which further understanding in the field, especially where that differs from previous findings, and explain any unexpected results. In terms of data preparation, given a few pointers on the slide here, you can make use of colors and shapes and figures to highlight appropriate data. Effective figures have a lot of impact. It's one of the things we give a high value to in the editorial office of Joule and in Cell Press more generally. Figures should not appear crowded. You should not have too many data sets per graph. if the axes are clearly labeled, even if some minor presentational points like having consistent fonts and font sizes, which are big enough to be legible, that makes a big difference when looking at through the figures of a paper. Particular legends should be brief, yet contain enough information there as well to aid understanding. And the discussion is something where we tie everything together in. Discussion is the most important section of the article. It's where you sell your data. A huge number of manuscripts are rejected because discussion is weak or only includes just a superficial description of the results. And make sure the discussion corresponds to and complements the results. Don't just simply repeat the results here and compare in the discussion other published results with your own. There may well be other work in disagreement with yours. It's important not to ignore that, to hide it under the carpet, as we say, but to confront differences in the literature and convince the reader that your interpretation is correct or better, and that your conclusions are rigorously supported by the underlying data that you're presenting. Okay, moving forward to the references. References are important because they're the bedrock of the scientific literature. It's important to convey and give an accurate reflection of previous work in the field. So all relevant previous studies should be referenced, and only relevant studies should be included in the reference as well. The references convey to the editor or reviewer that you are familiar with recent work in the field, you have an understanding of recent work, and so if the reference section is poor, that immediately makes an editor or referee think that perhaps the author's knowledge of the field is limited, and that's a big warning sign, a red flag. It is, and talking again about ethical concerns, it's important not to have excessive self-citations in the references. Don't just cite every one of your own previous papers. That gives a very poor impression to an editor or to reviewers. And avoid excessive citations from your friends or colleagues, or even from a single region. It's important that the references should give a fair reflection of relevant work in the field. You can also check the guidelines for a specific journal to ensure the reference format is correct. That makes the editor, gives a good impression to the editor. And again, I briefly talked about plagiarism detection software in the past. This covers every aspect of preparing a manuscript. We have advanced tools to detect where there has been plagiarism. So please don't just copy and paste from previously published papers, even if they're your own papers. That's counted as plagiarism. It can cause big problems and sanctions for you and consequences for you as an author. And finally, just to mention the acknowledgement section in writing a paper, please make sure anyone who's helped contribute to the work is acknowledged, and all funders, financial support and funding bodies are properly acknowledged in that section too. Okay, in terms of the editorial process, we need to make a bit of progress here, and I've outlined some of this in terms of preparing a manuscript. But there is very much a journey that an editor considers from the initial manuscript submission. There's an editorial review where many papers we decide to reject without review, and otherwise we will contact reviewers for full technical evaluation. And I hope that the tips and advice I've given on preparing a manuscript minimizes the chance that when you submit to a prestigious journal, that minimizes the chance that you'll be rejected without review, without sending out to referees there. To give a few more insights into this area, if we do return the manuscript to authors, we try to give a reason why we don't feel that the work is a strong candidate for publication. And that's the reason we do this, is to try and help the author and to save everyone's time so that a more appropriate journal can be found straight away, to save the author's time as well as the reviewer's time. If we send a paper out for review, as editors, we identify experts in the field and we ask them to evaluate, of course, the technical quality of the data and how well supported the conclusions presented are by the underlying data. But also, we ask reviewers to give their view on the importance of the work, both to those within the direct field, but to those in other fields as well. As editors, we make independent decisions on manuscripts. We don't blindly follow referees' recommendations, but we ask referees for their view on the manuscript in totality. So we obviously consider reviewers' comments. We balance our own experience and knowledge of our journal and the field and use our own scientific judgment and to decide really whether we feel that this work merits publication in our high-impact journals. So there are often many sorts of examples of revision stages where we might have concerns that the referees highlight that we ask the authors to address, and then we wait until a revised manuscript comes in before making a final decision on a manuscript. And where referees and editors do set forth concerns to authors, we ask authors to address all of those concerns and give a point-by-point response to each and every one of the concerns highlighted. Even where you don't agree with some of the concerns, we want to know why you don't agree. And it may be that we feel that your point of view is very reasonable and you don't need to do further characterization or further experiments that a referee might ask for. We may feel that that is necessary, but please give a point-by-point response to all of those aspects. To make your revision count, include the detailed point-by-point letter. Be aware that any revised manuscript may go back to previous reviewers. It may go to new reviewers as well. So don't be too confrontational or too rude in your response letter there. Okay, just coming to the final few slides of the presentation now. It's often hard to define what the right decision is. High-impact journals like mine reject many submissions. Sometimes it's around 90% of submissions that will get rejected. And sometimes, if we reject a paper, the author might feel that's unfair. And we will always want to hear feedback. If we've rejected the paper and you strongly feel that this is the wrong decision and it's not a well-supported decision, please contact the editor to let them know. Editors are usually reasonable people, and if you can calmly and objectively explain why you feel the decision is wrong, why the editor's decision or the referee reports are wrong, the editor will think about that carefully. They may reactivate your manuscript and go back to some of the original referees or approach a new appeal or adjudicative referee there. So do think carefully about whether initiating an appeal is an appropriate thing there. Sometimes we feel a manuscript might not be suitable for our own journal, but we can find an excellent alternative home within the Cell Press family or the wider Elsevier family. And in that case, we can often offer a quick, streamlined process where we can offer usually an expedited evaluation or publication process in a different journal. This transfer process is increasingly important, and it's something that we are proud to offer. Of course, hopefully your manuscript is accepted. That's when you as an author can celebrate, when we as an editor can celebrate. And that takes you into the production, the post-acceptance process, and we have at Cell Press full-time, excellent professional editors who can guide you through from the acceptance stage to the final publication of your manuscript. That's what we like to see. And so, yeah, very finally, a few slides just to say, Cell Press, we always look at innovating content delivery. We serve the scientific community. When a manuscript is accepted, we use our position to try and ensure that it has as much visibility and as much publicity as possible to ensure that the great research that you're doing is shared to the widest audience possible. So we put a lot of effort into making sure how we present papers on our publication portals are as effective and as clear and as eye-catching as possible, making sure our content delivery is good. We have a range of features in terms of graphical features and author videos and special article types and previewing great work that we're publishing to maximize the visibility there as well. It's something that Cell Press does. Moving forward there, we have a range of features, including STAR methods, which is a part of our commitment to open data and transparency and ensuring everything we publish is as reproducible as possible. And so we have STAR methods allows researchers in a structured way to give all the information needed so that other labs can reproduce the work that they are publishing. Okay, so they are some of the key points that I wanted to mention in my presentation here. So Mentor is another feature we have. Just to my final couple of slides, we do encourage dialogue and connections. We have a blog, the Crosstalk blog, to highlight topical areas in scientific publishing. This can be around new models of evaluating work, like double-blind processes or open peer review, and so on. It could be around the, open access or how work becomes available. And we arrange a series of events called Cell Symposia and lab links too, to maintain strong connections with the research community. So there are some of the key points. I hope I've been able to convey, from my perspective as an editor, what we do as editors, what we're looking for in a manuscript, how you can best prepare your manuscript to maximize the chances of success in publication in high impact journals, and to give a few insights about the publication process more generally there as well. And so really appreciate everyone attending. We'll now move to the questions and answers, the Q&A sections here. So there've been a number of questions submitted already. I'm just looking through. I'll give answers to some of these soon, but if you have further questions, please do write these in the question box on the portal, and then I will try and answer these in the minutes ahead. Okay, so one of the questions I'll come to first is, do you think journals should have more transparency about editorial decision-making to help the researchers and students like us? That's a really great question, and my answer is yes. We are committed to transparency, and I think it is very helpful for the authors, especially for the students, if they understand what the decision is, how the editor has arrived at that decision, and what the sort of evidence that the editor has weighed up to support the decision they're making is. But most of our journals at the moment have a single blind reviewer system. So we don't have complete transparency in that we don't divulge the identities of the reviewers. So some of our journals are piloting projects in that area with an open review system, where if the reviewer agrees to it, then their identity can be open to there. But at the moment, with a single blind system, the reviewer is aware of the identity of the author, but the author isn't aware of the identity of the reviewer. So part of the role of editors like me is to hopefully convey, when we're making decisions, all the reasoning behind that. That reason might be that there are underlying scientific problems with the data presented. It might be that the conclusions reported aren't well supported by the results that the authors are presenting. It might be that the work is technically correct, but doesn't advance on the field in a meaningful way. So that could be that it deserves publication somewhere, but not to the journal, especially if it's submitted to a prestigious journal, which the authors hoped to get it submitted to. So yes, I do think journals should try and convey as much information as possible. And again, I will come back to the fact that editors are reasonable people. So if you feel you've got a decision and you can't understand why that has been made, please feel free to contact the editor, asking them for more information or to explain parts of that decision. Or if you have specific concerns about that decision, ask the editor to respond to those concerns. But yes, it's a really great question. There's another question here. How does pre-publishing sit policy-wise at Cell Press? Example, archive, etc. So our different, again, a great question. Our different journals have our policies listed on the journal web pages, so do look carefully at those. But in general, repositories such as archive, yes, that is okay for the initial submitted paper. So what is not possible is for, if your work is accepted at one of our journals, the final published version that has had all the production enhancements and so on can't be deposited on an open repository there. But the initial pre-publishing version on a repository like Archive is generally okay at our journals, but do have a look at the journal-specific policies there for more information. There's another question here talking about what does it cost to publish a paper in self-press journals? What's the range, especially for financial costs, especially for Egypt? So, good question again. As I explained, most of our journals are subscription journals. So in a subscription journal, there is no cost at all for the author to publish in the journal. The business model of the journal is that institutes subscribe to the journal. There are no author charges of any kind, no publication charges, no page charges or color charges or anything like that. So for most of the self-press journals, the cost is zero. We do have some open access journals though, which is an author pays model. So for our open access journals, and if you remember, I mentioned like our journals Cell Reports or Cell Report Physical Science or iScience, these are all open access journals. And for those journals, there is an author charge if your paper is accepted for publication in that journal. And the charge varies between the different journals. I should mention Elsevier has a broad journal called Helion as well, which is for well-conducted research in the field, which is also an open access journal there. The charges are different between the different journals there. So again, do have a look on the journal websites for the publication charges that are affecting you there. For some of the self-press journals like iScience, the publication charges in the range of $3,000 US. For some of the journals like Helion, I believe you'll be able to find the publication charges for those open access journals on the websites there. There's another great question here. Can you talk about how to write a follow-up email to the editor when the journal doesn't respond in a reasonable amount of time? Yep, that's good. A really good question. Editors should be delivering a professional service here. And if you've got concerns at any time that your paper is being a bit slow or you're not sure what's happening, please do contact the journal. Please write. You don't need to wait a certain amount of time there. And just write a short, polite message explaining the situation, saying you submitted your paper so many days or so many weeks ago, you're not quite sure what's happened, please can I have an update? And the journal should be glad to provide that update there. The rate determining step of the evaluation process is nearly always with the reviewers rather than the editor. At self-press journals, full-time editors like me, we try and make sure reviewers submit their reports as soon as possible. We're actively reminding reviewers, referees, to get their reports in on time if they are overdue. And we pride ourselves on our efficient turnaround times at all parts of the process. But yeah, if you think it's taking a long time, please just send a short and polite message to the editor, and they should be able to give you an update on your paper there. That's a good question. Got some other questions here. Again, a couple of questions about the engineering field. Yes, our open access journal, Cell Reports Physical Science, covers the whole spectrum of physical sciences, including some aspects of engineering, especially where they interface with materials or devices, for example, there. So Cell Reports Physical Science is a good engineering field to look into. We also have the new journal called Patterns, which covers the broad spectrum of data science research, and there is a fair amount of engineering within that. My journal, Jewel, publishes some engineering work, again, at the sometimes at the device level, sometimes at the much bigger scale, so direct air capture of CO2, for example, from the atmosphere, and some of the chemical engineering and bigger picture biomass conversion and analysis of bigger picture engineering processes that can be covered in my journal, Jewel, too. So if you have more specific questions about aspects of engineering, please put those in the question mark here. Looking at some of the other questions here, I'm a computer science researcher. Where can I publish data set related papers? So Elsevier and Cellpress, as part of the broader Elsevier family, has a journal called Helion, which might be relevant depending on what your research is there, if you have new data which adds to the field. If you're looking at more data sets, we have a service called Mendeley Data, which I encourage you to have a look at there to see whether that might be appropriate for your needs. So do have a look at Mendeley Data. Another question, how important is it to consider the editorial team to selecting a journal, as impact factor does not precisely state its exact ranking and status? Good question. Yeah, hopefully as a journal, if you are aware of the editorial team and you respect the editorial team or you've had good interactions with them in the past, that's a good leading indicator that that journal could be appropriate for your research. I would echo your points that impact factor is often something that's given a lot of attention by many researchers. Impact factor is a measure of how much work published in that journal has been cited, the average citations for work published in the 2 previous years in that journal, and what that is. But it's very much a proxy measure of the journal as a whole, and it really shouldn't be over-interpreted, the impact factor. It shouldn't be the only thing you're thinking about when deciding which journal to submit to. I say that as the editor-in-chief of Joule, a journal that will have a great impact factor of around 30 or so. So I'm by no means embarrassed about what our impact factor will be. I'm very proud about what we've achieved, but please don't think purely about impact factor. Think about the scope of the journal, the work that's been published in the journal, and how relevant that is to the field that you are researching in yourself. There's a question here about my journal, Joule. Hi, Philip, nice talk. Thank you very much. I noticed there are many solar-related papers in Joule. Hope more opportunities are provided for other fields. Yeah, Joule is very much a broad scope energy journal. We're not just a solar journal, PV journal. So we've had lots of work in energy storage, be that batteries, for example, or other more novel methods of energy storage. We have lots of work in heating and cooling, in thermoelectric materials and devices, in steam generation, for example, in catalysis, so in ORR and HER, biomass conversion, in energy policy and analysis, and CO2 capture, and so on, and so on, and so on. So I think, yes, we very much welcome leading energy research, whatever the discipline is, to Joule. So if you've got some great work, please submit that to us there. There's a question, sometimes AE, I assume that means academic editors, associate editors, bias towards papers from a particular region. How to avoid such AE? I think the question of bias is really important. It's not something we've covered so much in the talk so far. Peer review and evaluation at journals depends on humans, be that editors and referees, making subjective judgments. And so there is a risk of bias at all stages there. It's very hard to get around that. At Cellpress, we think it's important that our editors are aware of potential biases and try to reduce those and mitigate against those. And we do that in a number of ways. We try to have diverse editorial teams. So in my Joule team, we have editors who are based in North America, in Europe, and in Asia. We try to think about diversity in terms of the expert reviewers we are approaching, and diversity in terms of the advisory board members that we have on our journals as well. And we try to make sure that we have expert assessment of work, and we're making decisions on the papers that are being submitted, and not on the institute an author comes from, or the country that they're based in, or any personal characteristics of the author, or anything else that's inappropriate to make a decision on. So yes, bias is important, and a good journal should be mindful of that and try to counteract that in any way they can. Looking at a range of other questions we've got here. For the conclusion section, which one is better, bullet point list or elaborate point and paragraph? I would say a concise conclusion, not so much bullet points, but try to have short, concise sentences which clearly convey what the key conclusions of the work are. If you submit a manuscript with lots of bullet points in it, it can look a bit draft, a bit preliminary, a bit underdeveloped. So we don't like too many bullet points in manuscripts, and we're considering them, but we don't like very long paragraphs with long, complicated sentences in them either there. But yeah, good question here. Question on which form of grammatical sentence we need to follow writing for a paper, e.g. present tense, present perfect there. So we have some guidelines on our different journal web pages. Scientific writing tends to be impersonal and in the passive tense, and in the passive voice and in the past tense there as well. But do have a look at the specific journal guidelines for any journal that you want to be submitting to there. There's a question here: after writing a paper, is there a way to check quality so we can reduce the chance of rejection? That's a great question, and I think I would encourage, before submitting to a journal, especially before submitting to a prestigious journal, do try and get feedback from some of your colleagues or co-workers about a manuscript there. That can both help inform the choice of journal you submit to, or even whether the research is ready to submit to a journal, whether the manuscript is in a form that's suitable to submit to there as well. Getting feedback and sort of informal peer review from some of your colleagues or previous workers or supervisor or former supervisors, that can be really helpful there. So it's always better to try and shape a paper and ensure it's got a good chance at the journal you're submitting to, rather than just speculatively submitting a draft manuscript to a journal, and that can annoy editors and reviewers there as well. Another question here: although important topic, what if a topic is not currently of high interest in the scientific environment? Will it still be assessed, considered equally, have the same chances? I think that's a really great question. The answer I would give is yes. If you're submitting a paper in a field which doesn't have much activity at the moment, but you still feel you have some important results that could influence other researchers and could attract the interest of other researchers, then that is potentially, yes, it's potentially suitable to a high-impact, prestigious journal. I don't just want my journal to be a journal of hot topics. For example, in the energy sphere, hot topics are things like perovskite solar cells and lithium-ion batteries. But we are very keen that Joule is not just restricting itself to those hot topics, but we're thinking about a range of topics, even if they're not so well studied at the moment, but which could be important and could have influence. So yes, I think you can still submit to prestigious journals, but it's even more important that in the cover letter and introduction, you explain some of the wider context and motivation there about why the work might be of interest to other researchers, even though it's in a field that's not having much activity there at the moment. But that's a really great question there. There's a question here: why it takes so much time to write a manuscript and research paper? That's a hard question to answer. I hope it doesn't take too long, but my advice is it is worth putting the effort in to present your work in as an attractive and clear way as possible. Question here: how to avoid too much self-citation in my research paper? Any tips? Yes, don't just cite papers that you yourself have written. As I mentioned, the references section is intended to give a balanced overview of the field and show how your work is building on the previous literature. It's very unlikely that it's only building on work that you have done in the past. So I think my tip will be make sure you are aware of the existing literature. Do extensive literature searches so you know what other researchers in your field have been doing, and that will help shape your own research and help think about how you present your research paper there as well. Really great question here: what to do if the reviewer asks you to make citation of some irrelevant articles? That's important. That's topical. It's been in the news a bit recently, and it can be unethical behaviour. If a referee is asking you to cite some irrelevant articles, you do not have to cite those. In your response to the reviewer comments, explain why you don't think that work is suitable to cite, and you can highlight in your response to the editor as well your concern about that. referees, and sometimes it can be in terms of references they want asking, it sometimes can be referees might ask you to do things more generally or do further experiments which you feel are not appropriate for different reasons. And it's much better to explain in your response to the reports why you have done something and why you have not done something, rather than just to automatically add references or just ignore some of the points that the reviewers have made there. So give a full point by point there. So that's a really good question. Another question here, if a manuscript is a resubmission and the new editors already have the new reviewers' reports in hand, will the new editor still take serious consideration based on the old reviewers' reports belonging to the previous submission? Good question. I think that happens very much on a case-by-case basis. It depends why the manuscript was rejected previously and how the authors have responded to that. So again, in line with my previous answer, if you give as much context as possible in your response and cover letter, that will help the editor make an informed decision there. Question here, will negative results of a research study can be considered for publication? Great question. Sometimes, I think is the answer. Journals historically have been quite bad at publishing or considering negative results, and especially in some of the more medical disciplines, that has a negative consequences for some fields. There are now certain journals which are interested in publishing negative results. I mentioned our journal Helion before, our journal iScience, sometimes is interested in publishing negative results. It depends on the importance of the negative results and as to which journal is most appropriate there. But yes, certainly we have some journals which are receptive to considering negative results. So good luck with that. Looking through some more questions here. What percent of plagiarism is allowed? Is it 5% or 10%? There isn't an exact answer there. I mentioned we have some plagiarism software that gives us, it doesn't give us a single score in terms of plagiarism or overlap. It gives us a range of metrics about how a manuscript overlaps in different ways with the existing literature and with previous submissions as well. So all I can say is when you're submitting a paper, you need to be writing it in an original way, not copying and pasting from other people, not copy and pasting from your own previous work. You need to be writing things in using new words and presenting new concepts there. So plagiarism overall is a problem, something which is an ethical breach. Question here, I completed my degree a bit later, I only have a bachelor. My paper is well written, am I likely to get a good run as someone with PhD? I think we try and consider all submissions on the merits of what's been presented in the paper and not in terms of the author's institute or country or other factors there. I mean, clearly, for science journals, the big majority of papers we are receiving and publishing are from people who have PhDs or working towards PhDs, but it's not universally the case. We do publish some papers from people working in industry, for example, too. So, yeah, if you feel you have important results to submit, please submit them to the journal, and that shouldn't be a barrier to you there. More questions coming in all the time. I want to know about publishing my research with machine learning technique with Cell Press. Great question. Our new journal, Patterns, covering data science, interested in machine learning, that might be suitable. Depending on what the problem you're studying is and the application of the machine learning, then some of our more subject-specific journals might be suitable there as well. Loads and loads of great questions. We're just coming to the end of the webinar. A minute or so left, I think. I'm looking through the form of questions. For more questions about pre-pub prints, policies, and archive, we've answered those. Do we have a journal dedicated to e-health services? You take a look at our journals that I've highlighted. It could be that Med is suitable. It could be that Cell Reports is suitable. It could be that our new Cell Reports Medical Science might be right there. So hopefully we can find an outlet for your research that you'll be interested in with that. And wanting to know more about writing. So, I mean, hopefully the answers that I gave help on writing the paper more generally there. I believe the webinar will be available offline to everyone after this. So thank you so much for all of your engagement and participation and listening to what I had to say. I really do hope we've been able to answer lots of the questions there, dispel some of the myths about publishing in high-impact journals. We're very glad of your support at Self-Press Journals and Elsevier more generally, and we look forward to receiving lots of high-impact publications from you in the future. So with that, thank you so much, and I will now end the webinar. Thank you.